Welcome to another edition of the Influence Global podcast. And I'm really excited today because we've got a very, very interesting character with us. No other than Dexter Moscow, which is a great name, I have to say, Dexter. Welcome to
Thanks.
the show.
Thank you
um,
very much.
so Dexter is a sales and video creation coach, amongst other things. And we're going to spend most of today's episode talking about live stream shopping. Obviously, has been a big part of the influencer marketing industry, but of course, isn't necessarily new because if we look at a brand name like QVC, of course, which of course Dexter has had lots of experience with, we're going to be talking about some of those experiences and what sort of trends we're seeing particularly. Before we do that, Dexter, just tell us a little bit about your background, because I think people will be fascinated to find out more about that.
Well, okay, thank you. And first of all, thank you, Gordon, for inviting me to have this conversation. And I must say, yes, Dexter Moscow is my real name. It's not my stage name. I obviously had parents with a sense of humor, but but yes, certainly. I started my career many, many years ago, as you can see by the grey hairs, in advertising. And I think that's where my love of words was first created. I then spent quite a number of years in property. And I always worried about saying this, but I was an estate agent. And I did coach negotiators on how to sell and understand how to be more friendly, I suppose, or more personal with their prospective purchasers and clients. And then out of that came an invitation to sell product on QVC, the shopping channel. Because a colleague and a friend actually said, I know you do train people. Would you like to sell for me on QVC? So I said, yeah, sure. What's QVC? I didn't even know. So this was, I think, 3 years after it started. And I've obviously found out that it was live television. And in those days, really what it was an online catalogue, a television station where people would tune in to hear about specific products. And at that time, it was only on Sky. So the demographic of that was people who could afford the Sky channels. And then it went on to Freeview, where it had a larger demographic. And one of them, funnily, were students who used to come home on a Saturday evening, having been out, and spend a lot of fortune, a lot of money buying products perhaps that they didn't need. So,
Right.
so that's my career in short, from advertising to property, and then onto television.
No, well, so tell us a little bit about live stream shopping, because of course, since the last 12 months, a lot of us have been not been able to go out to the shops, and we've been able to purchase, from online store. But I'm guessing the likes of QVC and others have seen their audiences rise hugely.
Yes.
I'd love to know how long people spend watching how much they're buying. Have you, what's the sort of turnover of something like QVC?
Well, now it's because it's a worldwide channel. It's in so many countries. It's something like $9 billion. It's
Wow.
not a small business. It started small, and I think it took about 5 or 6 years before it came into profit. And in essence, as I say, it was like an online catalogue where people would tune in and find out what the well, QVC, first of all, let's define what QVC stood for. It was quality, value, and convenience.
Mm.
And in the early days, it wasn't necessarily the finest quality. It was sometimes the end of ranges of products. Was it the best value? Perhaps not. But then it was a means to get conveniently products sent. And the key thing there was a 100% no quibble return policy. So even if somebody took something like makeup and used it and sent back the empty bottle, they got their money back. And I think what's happened since then is that people, it's all about trust, and we'll talk more about that. And I know you want to talk a lot about influencers. Well, I would say that QVC were the original influencers.
Mm.
because people would tune in after, and this is a reality here, it took about 8 points of contact before somebody would decide to trust the channel enough to buy from them. And you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think anything has changed. It still needs a number of points of contact before people say, okay, I've heard you, I trust you, I like what you're saying. And it was a conversation between the presenter, who people would trust, and the guest, and I was a guest presenter, who would come on and validate the product that they were talking about. And I don't think it's changed. Amazon is about trust, and came sometime after QVC, and I think they followed the QVC model that, if you don't like it, send it back to us. Trust us and you will be well informed. I think that's the key to it.
So presumably, then, once some people have bought from the channel and had a good experience and liked it, then they're sort of hooked and want to engage more. Do people? Is there a certain demographic of audience, or has that changed in the last 12 months?
It's changed dramatically. As I say, initially QVC was only accessed via Sky TV. So somebody who could afford the subscription would tune into that channel. Then when it came on Freeview, which it still is, and it's on mobile and all the platforms now, it widened so that you had people who were housebound, who couldn't get out, student body that would, as I say, come home after a good night out and watch the television, because it is an education to see how they sell. And it isn't the American style of QVC. In fact, one of the things that they did when I was working with them, and I was freelance, they sent me out to the States to watch how guest presenters were taught. And I brought the ideas back, and I said, this is not going to work in the UK. People like not to be sold to, they like to be informed. And I think what has happened now, the demographic has changed so that people are so used to online shopping that when somebody really explains what the product does, how it impacts them, and all the necessary information in a story format, because that was the key thing with QVC, and now all channels adopt that, if they're going to do well, is to place the product in somebody's hand so that they know how they will feel when they get the product home. And I think, the reviews you see on Amazon, the customer service that you get on Amazon, we now will always do that. I don't believe, unless the retail market, the shops, really understand, not about customer satisfaction, about customer delight. And we've seen a number of companies that are absolutely delightful to deal with online. I think it's always going to be people purchasing in that way.
Yeah. And do you think there is, one of the big things about selling, creating urgency, of course, isn't it? And from when I see the channels, I can see that there's only a certain amount that they have available. And how did that work then? This sort of creating of getting them to purchase, not just, you talked about inform, which is obviously a very important part of this process, but you also need to find a way where the consumers are pressing the buy button.
Yes, and you're quite right to talk in terms of like the scarcity. And we know that's one of the 7 elements of influence. If you show there is scarcity, now people often narrow their eyes and say, "Oh yeah, okay, only 4 more to sell." Yeah. It had to be true, because as a shopping channel, as a TV channel, it still is under the auspices of the Television Authority. So every show is taped and can go under scrutiny. So if somebody says there are only 4 left, that has to be true. The reality, of course, is how many were purchased in the first place. So you may start with only 10 and 6 of them have sold. So, there is that element to it, but it has to be true. And I think that what has happened as it's become more acceptable to purchase in this way, the reality that there is only a certain amount of purchasing, and then when that's gone, that's gone. And that certainly is true of, and I'm going to use the term, that today's special value, which with QVC is launched at midnight every night. And we know at that point in time, that product is the lowest that you can purchase from a retail perspective, not necessarily on the internet, but in the main, they are so keen on their pricing and their packaging. They will bring a number of elements together so it is a unique package for that today's special value. So in terms of value, it is there absolutely now.
So, and we were just talking earlier about influencers entering this sphere now, and particularly around e-commerce. Big brands like Alibaba and Amazon actually have got their own influencer programs now, because they realize these individuals have got huge audiences. In fact, I noticed that Alibaba are outwardly looking for around 1 million influencers over 3 years, starting this year with 100,000, which is a fairly bold statement. But I guess it's because they believe that influencers have that authenticity and are natural storytellers, which of course are key ingredients, aren't they, in creating that consumer advocacy.
It's essential. And I would say that the word that you've used, authenticity, is at the center of that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
We talked about trust. And when we talk in terms of us, and when we're going on networks and we're influencing our customers, our prospects, those three elements of know, like, and trust is certainly true. And these influencers, I used to call myself an evaluator when I was selling on QVC. So they would give me a product, be it a technology product, or, and this is going to blow my street credibility, for many years I was known as Mr. Christmas, selling all manner of Christmas decorations, Christmas lights and things like that. And so I used to take the position, in inverted commas this is, I was seen as everybody's favourite uncle. So that was the kind of position that I took as an evaluator. And I think the influencers are doing the same. They create a persona that certain sections of the market will buy into. And when that know, like, and trust is there, and they say, I've tried this product, I recommend this product, people will listen. So I don't doubt that Amazon and so many, as you say, Alibaba and so many other retailing organizations will bring in influencers.
Is there a worry, Dexter, if, for example, an influencer has actively reviewed and promoted a product, and then there is something that happens subsequently that's wrong, i.e., there was a classic case a while ago where an influencer had a range of merchandise and t-shirts, and they had awful problems with the supply chain. And of course, a lot of those followers were quite angry and upset about that. And of course, they shared that on the influencer's feed, which obviously is not very good. So I just wondered, are there any worries about damage to reputation when product quality or supply chain issues or anything else? Because they're putting their name to this thing, aren't they? So I just wondered what your thoughts were on that.
I agree with you 100%. I think that if they are not, using your word again, authentic, if they're not authentic and they cannot be shown to have absolute credibility, then it will damage their reputation and damage the products and companies that they represent. So I think that, again, we're in a different era now where people do trust what is said on the internet, and overnight it can be damaged. We've seen it in politics. We've seen it where the PR companies have got it wrong, and instead of a company CEO or chairman putting his hands up and saying, "Oh, I've got it wrong," unless they do that and they make excuses, and we won't talk politically, but Mr. Cummings is a prime example, who got it wrong he didn't put his hands up. So his credibility on his statements now, it'll be very interesting to see what happens. But I agree with you. One of the things when I train people, as I did for many years, 16 years, I was the chief trainer at QVC, and the most difficult people to train were actors. Or to coach, perhaps coach how to sell, because they took a role rather than the brand manager or the inventor or the designer, who was so passionate about what they had created and what they were selling and talking about. That was the psychological people would look at and say, that doesn't feel right. And if you're taking a role, as actors do, doesn't feel right. So I think it's the same with
doesn't come through. Doesn't come through. Yeah.
So an influencer making a mistake will damage themselves and the companies that they represent.
Yeah. So let's just use that then as an example. So somebody that's already now got a reasonable audience, let's just say 100,000 followers on Instagram, now wants to set her own or his own web store up and wants to now start their own live stream shopping channel. So they're going to now start using YouTube or Instagram or YouTube, start promoting a range of products. What are some of the tips that you might suggest they do to really convey and sell product?
The first thing, and you've identified it absolutely, is storytelling. That if they understand, and you know, this book, and I would say this, Stand Up and Sell, is about stories. It's my experience when I was working with QVC and the stories that I told to not only place the product in somebody's hands. I've recently been working for the Jewelry Channel, and a couple of the guys there are the buyers, they're the merchandisers of jewelry products, and they also appear on the screen. It's a different setup to QVC because it's whereas QVC sets a price and that's it, the Jewelry Channel will come in with a figure and slowly reduce the figure, and the final figure is what wherever they come in that sales process, they buy at the lowest price. And the jewelry merchandisers and buyers were focused on price. And so we worked on the way in which to create the stories so that, first of all, there was that element of trust. And the kind of stories are, you know, imagine how you will feel when you are wearing this particular piece of jewelry. People will say to you, you know, it looks fantastic. The sparkle, it really shines through your eyes, and the fire in the gemstones. You know, where did you buy that? And so then that's the recommendation. But it's about placing it in somebody's hands and making them feel good about that purchase.
It's an emotional sell, isn't it? And I noticed, I was looking at one of the channels the other night, knowing I was going to talk to you, and I noticed then the camera, you're hearing the presenters talk, but the camera is then zoomed in on a gemstone to give it that sense of. So while you're hearing this evocative language, because it is the word sometimes, isn't it, that make you feel good.
Yes.
And then you're seeing the product, so it's that link between the two.
Yes. It's those three elements. It's you know, that you are showing it so that you are dealing with the visual aspect of it. You're telling them about it so that it's the auditory aspect, and then you are explaining it from an emotional perspective. And you're right. You know, there's that formula: people buy emotionally, they decide logically. And so you have to give them the numbers. That's the logic part of it. But the emotion always comes first. And so the kinesthetic, the feeling of how they're going to be when they get that product home, be it a piece of jewelry or some cleaning equipment for the house proud, it's all about creating the emotion, taking them through the understanding of it, and tapping into all of those aspects of how we receive and perceive information.
What about stuff like other emotion, like laughter? You know, because that's something that can you know, it's almost as though the presenters are, or presenter, having a nice time with this product. He's feeling it with himself. Now, I love all this. Now, for any of you that have got problems with technology, I'm one of them. You know, blah 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 blah. You do get this sense that you're with you're with the person that's telling that story, because they're using a little bit of comedy. What do you think that part plays in the process?
I think it's essential. I think the fact that you've seen it and you recognize it shows that you know exactly what it's about.
Mm,
You know, at one time they used to say sex sells,
mm,
and that certainly is true. But it is, when you look at the television commercials, the ones that we remember are the ones that make us smile. It could be the moment, or it could be the aha moment.
yes.
So I agree with you. I think if there's humor, in the early days of QVC, if there was a mistake made, then they used to pan away, or they used to put up a slide to cover the mistake. But as it evolved, they realized that it's almost like when you see these blooper programs on TV, we love to see the mistakes, and so
Mm,
TVC used to leave those mistakes in, and it was very endearing. And it's, as you say, people would then say, you know what, they're just like me.
mm. Well, do you know what? It's funny you should mention that. Just as I'm listening to you, do you remember the Tesla uh, product launch? I think it was a Hummer, or effective Tesla Hummer or something, and it was promoted as shatterproof glass, and Elon Musk actually hit the glass in front of the world press, and it smashed. Um, the PR that he must have got as a result of that must have been 10 times anything else. And I do wonder whether or not that was bad PR, or just it's got his name. Obviously, we're talking about it, and they must have fixed that problem by now.
Yes.
But I wonder, and that the reason I make that link is because that was humorous, but it didn't seemingly damage the individual or the brand. And I'm just wondering again, I mean, QVC, of course, is a live stream, live channel, isn't it? Whereas some of the others, of course, are pre-recorded. What happens if a product demo, doesn't work, or there is a problem? Is that where comedy can just do its part?
Yes. And it is sod's law, if that's the right expression, that and certainly when I was selling the technology products, and some of them were quite high priced technology, computers, telephones, mobile phones at that time, and you could rest assured that you practiced and you tried the different elements of it so that you could show it very well. The moment you went on air, it would fail, and you had to cover it up. And the mistake, and I would say that, if for anybody that's listening, and if they trip over their words when they're making a presentation, be it in video or to a live audience, never cover it up. Always put your hands up and say, this is not how it was supposed to go.
Yeah.
Let's see if I can make it work that way. And what used to happen with QVC is that we would talk them through. We would say, it's always going to happen. When as soon as we go live, this is going to fail. So what I need to do now is, and so we would talk through until such time as we could make it come right. So yeah, and it's what you said and identified, the humorous part of it, the human part of it, and that was the key with the presenters. The presenters' position was not as salesmen. What they were doing is they were influencing people to think that this woman is somebody that I can trust, and therefore I'm going to at least listen to what they say. And when there was like somebody like me sitting in as a guest who was like the expert, and we really had to do our research on it, all elements of it, then they took the position of the everyman or the every person. So they would ask of us the difficult questions that the viewing audience would want to know the answers to. Obviously, we worked out what those questions would be. And in the early days, not so much now, we would have telephone calls. People would come into the studio, and the dedicated followers, and would ask the questions of us about the product. And we had to be 100% honest. If we didn't know, the rule was don't bluff it because you're going to be found out.
Mm. Yeah, because that's interesting, isn't it? Because again, going back to sort of content creators, influencers, they're doing live, they could well be getting interaction with potential consumers, and they need to be absolutely clear about the products that they're talking about, or be honest and say, actually, I must admit, I haven't been asked that question before. I'll have to find out for you, and I'll let you know in the chat. But thanks everybody for your contributions.
Yeah.
It's engagement, isn't it? We don't want now. We want to feel like we are engaging with the presenter, which is, I think, really good. Whether it's online, telephone, or text to the screen or whatever, I think it's all good. So where do you see the future then? Because at the moment, e-commerce and live stream is going to explode. You look at the numbers and you start to see, wow, this is, I mean, I often talk about influencers being the new retailers. And I wonder whether or not people are going to go back to bricks and mortar and retail shops in the same numbers. I mean, yes, they can't touch, smell, and feel things in the same way that you can if you go into a store. But what's your thoughts about this?
I feel that we're always going to shop online. I believe that that's here to stay, purely because of the convenience aspect. And when you look at how Amazon are expanding the instant service, so you can order it and virtually get it the same day. But by that same token, Amazon have started opening their own stores. And I must admit I've not been inside one. So what level of retail, or is it food? And I think it is. I think a lot of the stores are talking about food. So that sensory element, I think, is important. And I think that any retailer, and retail will still be there, the high street will change dramatically, with the major stores like Debenhams and these kind of heritage brands, where the large store is no longer going to work. There are exceptions, so Selfridges and things like that, where they have concessions within the stores. But I think the age of the large store is numbered. In fact, I think the number is up. But I think that, again, I agree with you, that sensory element, so that if you walk into a store that really focuses on the customer experience, and we know what the customer wants. It's the same with QVC. We had to not place ourselves saying, I love this product because I would. It's, I love this product and I can see that this would help. And then the focus is always, and I would say this of anybody who's making a presentation or putting a presentation together, what is it that your audience wants to know? Not what you can tell them, what they want to know. And so this customer experience, and there are stores that get it right. If you go to, Spitalfields, I think, in the city, where you have lots of food stalls, where people can taste the food. And they know that, if it's vegan food. And these people are true vegans and they love to cook that kind of food. Or meat products. There is a store, I think it's in Covent Garden, which is a cheese store. And you walk in and it is almost a large refrigerator, where it keeps the cheese at a even temperature, so the taste experience. You walk in and somebody will say to you, what kind of cheese do you like? Well, let me show you George, because George is an expert on this kind of cheese. And it can be the same for clothes, it can be the same for cosmetics. And I'm speaking from some experience here, because I worked with a guy who used to put sensory concessions into stores, like Harrods, like Selfridges. And he would talk about the brand experience, not the product, just the brand experience. And I think if retailers are going to win, that's how they need to win. It's got to be a superb customer experience where they will then say, I'm going to go and buy back from them. I may order from online, but that's the store and those are the people I want to work with.
Yeah. And I guess for the influencers that are promoting this, they have to be absolutely sure that that experience is going to be supported, because, as we said earlier, what you don't want to have is they taking all of the time to create this beautiful product presentation, whether it be an unboxing video, whether it's linked to, well, just a proper product demonstration, and know that things are going to happen quickly, swiftly, and the customer's going to be satisfied with it
Yeah,
subsequently. I think with something like Amazon, now they've almost set the benchmark, haven't they? The immediacy of next day, and the reviews and all of those things, and it's making sure that we all keep up to sort of that standard as brands.
absolutely.
Well, I must say,
If
it's been, sorry, go on.
can I give you just a couple of examples of
Yes, do,
companies
do.
that got it right in the
Absolutely, please.
pandemic? And one of them is Pret-a-Manger. Pret-a-Manger, very early on, when they knew that people couldn't come into their stores, saw that people were going out and picnicking. And it's going to happen now. And so what they did was to create picnic boxes, where instead of the mother having to make sandwiches for all the different people's taste, Pret-a-Manger said, choose your sandwiches, we'll put it in a picnic box, go and enjoy your day. And that was brilliant.
Mm.
And then another company, I didn't work with Pret-a-Manger, but I did work with another company called Talking Tables, where they supplied a range of products for dinner parties. And people were not having dinner parties. So what they did, and it was Christmas time, they created, with my help, what we called a box of delights, where they would package various ideas for Christmas, and a complete package for Christmas, not food, but these different fun games and other things. So a company would send it to their customers, or a family would send it to family members. And on Zoom, they would open the box at the same time, and there would be their box of delights. And for me, that was clever pivoting.
Mm.
And the owner of the company did a couple of videos to explain exactly why they were packaging it in some way. You can't meet your family personally. Let's help to bring you together.
Mm.
That's clever marketing.
Yeah, and I think, I know we've used the word pivot a few times. I think it just shows relevance, doesn't it, more than anything else, and understanding your audience, and it's changing habits. Well, it's fascinating talking to you today, Dexter. Thank you so much for giving your some insights and thoughts around the world of live stream TV, and indeed broadcasting when it comes to influencers as well. Thank you so much. If anybody needs to find out more about you, where do they do that?
If they go to Dexter at dextermoscow.co.uk, if they want to email me with a specific question, or dextermoscow.co.uk to have a look and see what I'm about in terms of coaching, training, and they can purchase the book if they want.
Right. Lovely to hear from you. Thank you so much.
Gordon, it's been an absolute delight. Thank you for inviting me to have this chat with you.
No problem.
Thank you.